What's up, my people? It's your boy Stantawn Kendrick coming at you with a video real quick. I know it's been a while since I've been on camera, talking to camera, talking about things. This channel has been pretty much like a ghost town recently, but I'm here to talk about something, and you guys know I always come to YouTube when I have something relative, something informative, and something worth making a video about. I'm not I guess a YouTuber in the sense of YouTubers do upload every day. I normally say something when I have something important to say. And right now I want to talk about overhauls, and I want to talk about why overhauls are such a daunting thing for I'm just speaking in reference to saxophone players, not other instruments, but just in reference to saxophone players, and some of the stuff that I've just recently went through with an overhaul and still am going through. So I want to talk about those things today. First of all, let's talk about what is an overhaul. I know I got people of different levels watching my videos, people that may be very used to the terminology and the things that I'm talking about, and I may have some people that are not as familiar, some other interested people from other instrument groups, several things like that. So when we're talking about an overhaul for a saxophone, a mechanical overhaul, and repairmen, please don't crucify me too much for saying things incorrect or with not with the right terminology. But when we're talking about mechanical overhauls, it's not a complete restoration, but what we're talking about is completely disassembling the instrument, taking all the corks off, taking the pads out, fixing body work on the instrument, straightening rods, swedging, cleaning, replacing the pads or changing pad types, if the player wants a different set of pads in than the one they had in previously, getting the right pads in, getting the resonators into the pads, what type of resonators they want, all of those types of things. Key heights, springs that may need to be replaced, but most of the time, all of the springs are not replaced. Some of the springs are replaced. I think I ran over most of everything, but definitely all the pads are replaced, all the corks are replaced, the felts are replaced, springs that need to be replaced. Everything is reassembled and put back together. Now, why is that such a daunting thing for us saxophone players? Because overhauls normally happen once every 5 to 8 years, I want to say. During those 5 to 8 years, you've been playing that instrument a certain way. You've gotten used to it. It's been broken in. It's settled. It's where it needs to be and where you've been used to it for all these years. So once it goes through a serious overhaul, when you get it back, it's not going to be what it was when you handed it over to be overhauled, as well as the fact of how long it took that overhaul to be done and what you've been playing on in the time that it's been getting overhauled. Overhauls can take two weeks to a month to do, depending on the busy schedule of your repairman, depending on how much in depth your overhaul is. And when you get that instrument back, it's going to be somewhat foreign to you. It's not going to be what you remember. It's going to have went through changes, and that can be a good thing. But most people look at that and most people experience a bad thing because they got to re-break it in. They got to get back used to it. They got to think about the things that were changed. It's a lot that goes on with an overhaul. There's a lot of stress. And if you're a professional musician, some of these things, depending on when you get that overhaul done, you may have some gigs down the road coming up. You might have a studio session coming up, and you really have to think about when you get that overhaul done and the time schedule after you get it done. You're going to have to go back to your repairman to talk about certain things if need be. Let's talk about my overhaul, and let's talk about the list of things that I've had going on. Let me just do a quick recap. Sometime in March, earlier this year, I was in a situation on the gig where we sit on stools. It was in the case was open. I had already put the horn in the case. I turned my back to grab something off of my stand, and before I knew it, my horn was coming off of the stool that was sitting on. It hit the ground, and when I picked it up, it was a banana bend. The body tube had taken a hit to the floor, and it was a banana bend. I basically found out that the person that was sitting next to me, who also was putting their horn away, and they're not really aware of this, that they bumped my case when they were putting their horn in their case, which caused my case to hit the floor. And I had a studio session at the end of that week. There was nothing that could be done to fix that in time for my studio session. So I had to rely on my Yamaha 23 tenor saxophone, and my Mark 6 was down for the count. There was no fixing it in that time frame. All I saw as a player was my horn was bent. It wasn't a crease, it wasn't a real like sharp bend, but overall the tube was curved forward, looked like a samurai sword, you know. So dropped it off at my repairman, and I went ahead and started playing my Yamaha 23, and I just put that horn in my memory basically, because I knew that it was gonna be a while, but I had no clue how crazy this story was going to continue to go. So I do my studio session. It was like a 3-day session. It was for a non-ed project, 9 horns, and I'm playing a Yamaha 23. By the time that studio session came, I had been playing on it almost a week, and then I continued to play it after the studio session because my horn wasn't done yet. However, I found out information, you know, after a few weeks that my horn was in repair. So what did I find out? All of the keys that go down to the body of the left hand, you know, the left hand keys, the travel time to get down to the body, they were not able to close, and they were stuck, you know, going up and down. And even though my repairman tried to straighten the body out, it couldn't get so close mathematically to a thousandth of an inch to the spot that it was before it was bent for those keys to properly travel down and hit the body like they're supposed to, closing all the way, maneuvering rod-wise, you know, on the swivel of the rod, moving back and forth. It just couldn't happen. Now, it had already been at that point, which is this year, 2022. The last overhaul I had was in 2015. So it had been, what, that's 7 years. At this point, being that everything was going to have to come off the body was going to have to be straightened. The pads, the original creases of the pads, the circular outline where they've been hitting the tone hole, it was not possible for it to completely line back up. So I was well in time at this point that my horn had to go from being repaired to going into an overhaul. He has to put new pads on there for them to seat the tone holes properly in the position that he had to straighten the body back to, which couldn't be pinpoint precise to where it was. Long story, less long, not short, but less long. Unfortunately, my repairman had a death in the family during the time he had my horn. That extended my repair time. It ended up taking 3 months for me to get my horn back because it was halfway done. It was, I don't know what percentage it was done, but it wasn't complete by the time he had a death in the family. So I was without that horn for so long. I had been playing a Yamaha 23 for so long. I played the Yamaha so long that I started to love it. I had forgot about what my horn was. So I eventually got my horn back, and anytime you get your horn back after something like that, there's going to be a honeymoon phase. You're going to go through a honeymoon phase. It's just, you're in such joy that you got your instrument back, you're going to go through a honeymoon phase. And I'm going to go back to speaking in general about overhauls and stuff like that and things to watch out for. I'm about to get there. So I get my horn back, and I go through at least maybe a week of a honeymoon phase. I'm thinking in my mind, oh, it's so much better, blah, 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 blah. Needless to say, I had sat my Yamaha 23 down, put it in the case, put it back in the closet. I was just on this, my horn being fixed and overhauled. After a week, and this is typical of an overhaul, depending on the job, depending on who did the job and how they did the job, you're going to need to go back in and have some adjustments made because the pads, they have seated, they might have moved a little bit. You might got some leaks now because it's a fresh overhaul. Some things might have moved. And sure enough, I had leaks in my left and right hand that I had to go and get taken care of. You know, the pads weren't sealing, they weren't going all the way down. I didn't hear that popping sound, you know, when you press on your fingers and you doot, 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 go down the horn, everything wasn't sealing. So I had to go and get that stuff adjusted. And then I got it back and things moved again. You know, but after that, I pulled out the Yamaha, and that's when everything became clear. First thing I noticed was the angle of the left hand, the way the pearl arms, the key arms, the way they were straight across compared to where my horn, freshly overhauled, the heights of the actual pearls were all different heights, whereas the Yamaha were kind of straight across. Even my Mark 6 Alto that I haven't had overhauled in over 10 years, maybe 20 years, was in line. So that was the first thing, was that I noticed that I was having some issues with facility with the left hand, because my fingers were kind of like this compared to being straight like this, right? Instead of being like this, they were kind of like this. And that's clear when you look at the overhaul and the felts being a little bit too thick and how the keys were laying. It just wasn't even. So that was giving me some discomfort, along with spring tension on certain keys, you know, being more stiff than other keys, you know. So I went back again and had these things kind of adjusted, but they weren't really fixed to my liking. But after having it for another couple of weeks, and then I had to go out of town with it and come back, I lived with it for a little bit, I noticed certain things. And this is some of the things you want to pay attention to when you get an overhaul. The key heights. I noticed right away that I was having some stuffiness in certain notes. See, it takes some time for you to sit with it and really find out exactly what you got going on. Live with it and see. But it's even better when you got another horn to actually compare it to, you know. So I will hold out a middle C and I would notice that it's kind of stuffy on my 6 compared to my Yamaha. You know, like, it's an obvious difference. I might play an example of this, you know, in the footage, but I noticed that there was some stuffiness there, you know, and I got to looking at the horn and it's not as free blowing as it used to be. That's something that I kind of in my mind kind of knew, but I really wasn't honing in and paying close attention as to why. And the biggest part of it was the key heights. The key heights on my 6, I'm making put, the camera's not gonna focus, it's gonna focus on my face, but I make him put just maybe a fingertip, maybe just the end point of my fingertip through. If I were to touch on the actual, in the space between the tone hole and the pad, I was just getting about this much fingertip. Whereas my Yamaha, I was getting about half the fingertip. Now, I don't remember this being a problem pre-overhaul. I think that my key heights were higher on my 6, and I never had stuffiness in my C and certain other notes, depending on which pad is open. I never had that problem until now. So even with a new set of pads and everything, the horn is not as free blowing as it used to be because the keys are closer to the body. Air can't travel as fast and freely. So that's an adjustment that I'm gonna have to make. So I think you got to sit with an overhaul. You got to look at everything that was done. If keys are bouncing, I had a key that's bouncing. My Bis B flat key is bouncing. So when I'm running certain passages, that key is hitting and it's throwing my hands off, let alone that the whole stack is too low to begin with. So, you know, I'm trying not to make this video long. It's already pretty long. But what I'm trying to say is when you get an overhaul done, expect a lot of changes and expect, you know, for your horn to be different than it was because you've been playing it a certain way for so many years. But you have to get with your repairman, make it clear exactly what you want before and after the overhaul, and don't be afraid to go back and go back and go back if it's not completely right. You know, most overhauls come with a warranty. You're gonna have some sort of guaranteed warranty, and things like key heights, pad replacements. I got a few pads on my horn that's not actually completely covering the tone hole, covering the pad cups. I have one key where metal has worn and I can see through the key cup and see the pad. We got to do a soldering job on that. Overhauls are very daunting. I have to say, overhauls are very daunting, and I just want you guys to really pay attention when you get overhauls done, because it can change the sound of your horn and the facility of your horn but you kind of just gotta live with it if you have an overhaul done, or you gotta get it adjusted to the point that it gets to your liking. Anyway, I might make a part 2 to this video. It's already pretty long and lengthy. I thank you guys for paying attention and watching. I do still plan to do an updated video about me getting my horn back. I know this was an intro to that. I talked about a lot of things, but let's just call it what it is. It is not finished yet.